actually going to be one more sign-up sheet if you could pass it around, and it's for notes. So we're going to continue on Ecclesiastes today, and I have good news and bad news about the note situation. If you're tech savvy and you want to get the notes on your phone, you can use this QR code and it will give them to you. What happened was I meant to write 4 or 5 pages of notes, and I wrote about a whole book, probably like 50 pages of notes. So it's extensive, but there's a lot of, there's like a whole story with the pictures and lots of notes from commentaries and links to classes and podcasts and things that helped me as I prepared for this study. So if you don't want to use this QR code, if you're not so tech savvy, this right here, we'll pass it around. You can just sign up with your email, and I'll just email you the notes if you want to look at them a little bit later. So I'll give this to you. Here we go. So we will jump right back into Ecclesiastes today. So the first 3 chapters we covered last week, and we heard from the author and the teacher. The author opens Ecclesiastes, and he says, hey, I'm going to share some words from this wise teacher. And it's kind of like introducing the teacher to the stage. He comes up. For most of Ecclesiastes, we will hear from the teacher. But today, we'll get to hear the author's final conclusion, kind of the application that we take away from this for our daily lives. So what we've been looking at is that the author's basic goal is to let the teacher share his wisdom and talk about all these experiments he's done with his life, the ways that he's tried to find meaning apart from God, and to see what actually holds up, what actually stands to be true. We learned a really important Hebrew word last time, which was hevel. This is a Hebrew word for hevel. In your Bibles, you'll see that it's usually translated meaningless or vanity, and we'll hear that over and over. Meaningless, meaningless, vanity, vanity. But the actual Hebrew word, the literal meaning of this word, is smoke or vapor. And so the author uses this word. It's kind of a metaphor itself. Smoke or vapor is not something I can control. I can't grab it and make it do something. I can't stop it or freeze it. It's a real thing. It's not meaningless in the sense that it is real, but I can't control it, and it's gone in a second. It vaporizes. And so the teacher will tell us the things of this life, meaning apart from God, even life itself is like a vapor. It's like chasing the wind. It's like trying to hang on to smoke. It's something that you can't do. Ecclesiastes is one of 4 pieces of biblical wisdom literature. So you probably are really familiar with Proverbs, maybe Song of Songs, and the book of Job. All of these work together, so it's like one big puzzle. These are the pieces of wisdom literature, and we need all of them to see the full picture of wisdom. So if we only looked at maybe Proverbs, for instance, we would read it and say, oh, well, it seems pretty simple. You just kind of do good, wise things, and then wise things will happen in return. 2 + 2 = 4, everything's great. But then we read Job, and we find out, actually, terrible things happen to good people who love God. Just because you're wise doesn't mean that you'll escape from suffering or pain. And then if we just read Job, we might think, what is up with our relationship with God? Does he even care about us? Why does he let these horrible things happen to us? And Song of Songs reminds us of the power and longing of God's love for us. So we need all of these pieces of wisdom literature to show us the full picture of wisdom. And Ecclesiastes is a very important part of this puzzle. So we will jump back in chapter 4, but the important thing to remember today is that we are going on a journey of reconciling our very delicate human condition and helping us appreciate the nature of life even better. We're going on this journey to say, I am finite, I'm very small, I can't control or sustain the universe, but that understanding allows me to enjoy the good things that God has given us, has given me. And we are recognizing, as Jesus followers, something that the teacher can't, because the teacher lived hundreds of years before Jesus was born. But we understand a relationship with Jesus, so all of this helps us as we faithfully follow Jesus today. So we'll jump in chapter 4. Chapter 4 focuses a lot on suffering and oppression, and picks up pretty much where you would think it would if you're familiar with Ecclesiastes. It says, "Again I looked and saw all the oppression that was taking place under the sun. I saw the tears of the oppressed, and they have no comforter. Power was on the side of their oppressors. They have no comforter. And I declared that the dead who have already died are happier than the living who are still alive." He's going to get very blunt and very, in some places, kind of disturbing with his thoughts with us today. And he's going to continue on this thought that if all we have is this, we have a few decades, as he says, under the sun, why is it even important to live? At least if you just die, you can escape this life and the pain and the toil and the suffering of this life. So this is a thought he's going to explore quite a bit today. He says, "Better than both is the one who has never been born, who has not seen the evil that is done under the sun. And I saw that all toil and all achievement spring from one person's envy of another. This too is a vapor, a chasing after the wind." And then he says, "Better one handful with tranquility than two handfuls with toil, chasing after the wind." He's going to repeat these thoughts quite a few times. In verses 7 through 8, he says, "Again I saw something meaningless under the sun. There was a man all alone. He had neither son nor brother. There was no end to his toil, yet his eyes were not content with his wealth. 'For whom am I toiling?' he asked. 'Why am I depriving myself of enjoyment? This too is meaningless, a miserable business.'" And what we see here is the teacher is kind of wrestling with this idea of pursuing what's important to us. If all that's important to us is wealth and power and acquiring material possessions, it's going to come with some other losses in other areas. When the goal in our life is being the biggest and the best, we actually lose purpose. We actually lose sight of what matters and the ability to actually enjoy life itself. This is a quote from the NIV Application Study Bible. They say, "Envy is the fuel that feeds the fire of our human striving after gain. When chasing the neighbor above us on the ladder, we inevitably step on the head of the neighbor below us. As disastrous as that is for the people who are trampled on, it's also futile for the person who is upwardly mobile at others' expense. The life of striving is fundamentally anti-neighbor." There is not enough money, fame, or power in the world to satisfy our discontentment. And like he's going to explore more, it's better to have people to walk through life with us than just pursue endless wealth. You have to pay to play in life. So if you pursue a career at the expense of having friends or a family, a community, then you're going to find that in the very difficult moments of life, you're alone. And maybe at the end of your life, you don't have anyone to share those moments with, anyone to comfort you or be with you in your pain. And at the end of the day, if you're not content with what you have, there will never be enough to make you content. I used to intern at a church in Southern California, and the pastor, Kenton Beshore, would give a sermon every year at Thanksgiving, and he would always say these phrases that greed is wanting the one thing that I can never have, which is enough. And contentment is wanting the things that I already have. If we're not content with what we have, we will never be content. Verses 9 through 11 say, "Two are better than one because they have a good return for their labor. If either of them falls down, one can help the other up. But pity anyone who falls and has no one to help them up. Also, if two lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone?" You might be familiar with some of these phrases in here. "A cord of 3 strands is not easily broken." And he contemplates some more about wise and foolish people. Investing in the people in our lives is usually not ever financially profitable. Usually it means we have to give up time and resources and energy to love our neighbor, to put them before ourselves. And if you have children or friends or family and they're people that you're close with, that you could call and they would be at your door in 5 minutes in an emergency, that costs a lot. You have to invest in those relationships. You're not going to make money, but you get to appreciate another human being that God made as his living image. You have companionship and people to walk you through the struggles of life and help you when you're down. Money and power, the teacher finds, do not eliminate human fragility. But the endless pursuit of money and power often comes at a cost to our human relationships. And we have been created for community. Just to be a healthy, normal adult, you have to have people in your life. And when we come to following Jesus, it's a community that's meant to be not just about me and my singular journey, but we're walking together. So reading the Bible and meditating on it and walking together in our churches and communities, we have to do that with one another. It's not a singular experience, and it's not meant to be. Verses 15 through 16, he'll think about, being a king and the king's successor. In the first verse, we get a clue that the teacher here is a king, whether it's King Solomon or maybe a Solomon-like figure. You'll find more about that in your notes. In the beginning of chapter 5, we're going to see that the teacher is going to say some things about taking vows in the temple. This is not an idea that's probably familiar to many of us, but in the ancient world, it was common to make vows or take oaths under the name of a god or goddess, and he's saying there's something different when you make a vow to God. And so he says when you make a vow to God, keep it. And often what a vow meant was you would say, God, if you give me this good gift, then I will dedicate it to you. I'll dedicate the use of it to you. Think about Hannah in the Bible asking for a child and saying, I'll give this child back to you, God. So one could vow to use their wealth or their material possessions on behalf of loving God and loving others. And so the teacher is going to remind us of the importance of making vows to God. Verses 1 through 2 of chapter 5, guard your steps when you go to the house of God. Go near to listen rather than to offer the sacrifice of fools who do not know that they do wrong. Do not be quick with your mouth. Do not be hasty in your heart to utter anything before God. God is in the heavens and you are on earth, so let your words be few. He says, when you make a vow to God, do not delay to fulfill it. And so it would be easy for us to look at this and say, isn't this kind of a vending machine relationship, like a quid pro quo? If you give me what I want, if you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. But God doesn't need anything from us. He doesn't need our end of the deal. This is meant to be an act of devotion, to say, God, I love you, and what you give me, I will use for your glory. And last time we talked about idols and how idols are hevel, like the author says. They're smoke, they're vapor. To try to get an idol to do what you want is like chasing the wind. And so God is different. God is the creator and sustainer of the universe. When you make a vow to God, it's not like a worthless idol. You're making a vow to the creator of the universe. And so when you do this, don't be hasty. Don't just open your mouth to look wise, but really be committed when you devote something to God. Making vows to God means something, and it's a commitment that should not be treated as a throwaway. And he'll continue on these thoughts. Don't let your mouth lead you into sin or say that your vow was a mistake. In verses 8 through 9 of chapter 5, he talks more about the oppressed. If you see the poor oppressed in a district and justice and rights denied, do not be surprised at such things. For one official is eyed by a higher one, and over them both are others higher still. The increase from the land is taken by all. The king himself profits from the fields. Don't be surprised if you see people oppressing other people. He says, people always want to climb the ladder of success. They always want to push other people down to get it. And a lot of it stems from the love of money, where people are making a profit off of things. And they're going to continue to oppress people if they can make money off of those things. In verses 10 through 11, he says something very, very important. Whoever loves money never has enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with their income. This, too, is a vapor. As goods increase, so do those who consume them. And what benefit are they to the owner except to feast their eyes on them? The sleep of a laborer is sweet, whether they eat little or much. But as for the rich, their abundance permits them no sleep. I have seen a grievous evil under the sun. Wealth hoarded to the harm of its owners, or wealth lost through some misfortune, so that when they have children, there is nothing left for them to inherit. Another phrase you might be familiar with: everyone comes naked from their mother's womb, and as everyone comes, so they depart. They take nothing from their toil that they can carry in their hands. And then he says, basically, we're all going to age. Our eyes are going to grow dark. Even our ability to appreciate and enjoy the things we have is going to fade with time. He says, moreover, when God gives someone wealth and possessions and the ability to enjoy them, to accept their lot and be happy in their toil, this is a gift from God. They seldom reflect on the days of their life because God keeps them occupied with the gladness of their heart. We live in a world that is very consumerist-centered, where we are obsessed with stuff. We get advertised stuff all day. We follow influencers who try to sell us stuff. We watch TV shows about stuff. It's stuff, stuff, stuff. And it kind of becomes our life mission to get more stuff or make our stuff better. And we will never be able to even appreciate what we have if we're not satisfied with what we already have. And we live in one of the wealthiest nations and one of the most profitable times in all of history. And somehow this is still our culture. This is what we're focused on. And it's still never enough. And when we can learn to appreciate little tiny beautiful moments of life that God has given us, when we can slow down and appreciate these things, then we are empowered to be free from stuff. We can be grateful to the God who gives us good things and also gives us even the ability to enjoy them. And so when we can enjoy, a cup of coffee in the morning and say, wow, I get to have a cup of coffee. It's delicious. It smells great. It's in my favorite mug that my mom gave me. And I'm in my house. I have walls and a door and windows and a roof. That's more than a lot of people in our world today. That's humongous in itself. And I can look outside and say, look at the sun shining, and look at that little flower. And God made all of those little petals, and he designed them, and the bee that pollinates them. And how cool is it that Jesus says God cares about all of these little details of nature? When we can learn to do that, it will empower us to enjoy life more than wealth ever can. Okay, now we're going into chapter 6, and chapter 6 is the most disturbing and brutal chapter that we're going to find here. Now, the design of Ecclesiastes, if you're reading it right now in your Bibles, if you're looking over those notes, then it kind of looks like it's all over the place. We talked about last time. It feels like a little bit of whiplash. It seems like he's repeating a lot of words and phrases. He says, under the sun, everything's a vapor. He's going to talk more about it's better not to be born. And it kind of feels like, did he just not have a thesaurus? Like, why didn't he think of other adjectives? But this is actually on purpose. It's just hard for us to appreciate Hebrew poetry in English. That's not bad. Most of us, our first language is not ancient Hebrew. But it's just that we can't really see it and appreciate it as well in English. And we're not really trained to. But when you hear those phrases repeated, and the words that are said over and over again, it's a clue to us that the author put a lot of time and effort into writing this, and a clue that there's some chiasm and some mirroring and some really intentional poetic design that's here. Like I said, chapter 6 is like the lowest, deepest part of this journey. Very brutal. I probably should give you a little bit of a trigger warning here. But that is also part of this design. There's 12 parts to Ecclesiastes, and the middle is the lowest point. So we're hitting the bottom, and we're going to come back up to the top. So let's start out with verse 1 through 2. I have seen another evil under the sun, and it weighs heavily on mankind. God gives some people wealth, possessions, and honor, so that they lack nothing in their they lack nothing their hearts desire, but God does not grant them the ability to enjoy them, and strangers enjoy them instead. This is meaningless, a grievous evil. This is a vapor. A man may have 100 children and live many years, yet no matter how long he lives, if he cannot enjoy his prosperity and does not receive proper burial, I say that a stillborn child is better off than he. It comes without meaning, it departs in darkness, and in darkness its name is shrouded. And then he's going to ponder, what advantage do the wise have over fools? Everything is a vapor. It's chasing after the wind. We can't know what's to come. A lot of these thoughts are going to be continued. In verse 12 of chapter 6, he says, "For who knows what is good for a person in life during the few and meaningless days for which they pass through like a shadow? Who can tell them what will happen under the sun after they are gone?" That's the end of chapter 6, and now we're going to see the chapters get pretty short from here on out. In chapter 7, he says, "It is better to go to a house of mourning than to go to a house of feasting. For death is the destiny of everyone. The living should take this to heart. Frustration is better than laughter because a sad face is good for the heart. The heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of the fools is in the house of pleasure. It's better to heed the rebuke of a wise person than to listen to the song of fools. Like the crackling of thorns under a pot, so is the laughter of fools. This too is a vapor." If you put thorns or maybe like a thorny bush or like a tumbleweed in a fire, it will glow and like light up really quickly, but it's not going to sustain the fire. So that's kind of an observation he makes here. There is a way of living that's centered on escaping reality, and it's pretty common for us in the US. A lot of us do it all the time. We are constantly flooding our senses with scrolling, with having good experiences, with making sure we don't have to be alone with our thoughts. And people, when we do this, when we live in this kind of distraction world where I don't want to ever have to face reality, it doesn't give us the attention span or the time required to contemplate deeper, important things we need to think about in this life. And so when we live in this world, a world where people like to escape reality, we're just trying to fill the emptiness that's inside of all of us, because we all have emptiness and brokenness. And we're just trying to fill that with things like scrolling, like eating, like drinking, being around people, filling our brains with things all the time. And in order for us to truly heal that brokenness, we have to confront reality. And the reality is, we're broken. We can't be healed by outrunning things that make us feel sad or scared or upset. The most pain in our life, we can't outrun it. It's impossible. We have to acknowledge reality in order to get the healing that we need. The gospel itself is a confrontation of my brokenness. Pleasure and feasting and having a good time, not all of those things are always bad. That's not what the teacher is saying. He said over and over, enjoy what you have while you have it. But when it's endless feasting and pleasure, we don't have the space to acknowledge the reality. And we understand that when we make a decision to follow Jesus, we have to accept the gospel. And the gospel tells me that I am a broken person. I'm shackled by the oppression of my own sin. And the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus is what sets me free. True healing comes from Jesus, and it can't begin until I confront the reality of my broken state and how desperately I need a God who became man, who entered into the brokenness and hevel of reality to set me free from sin and death. We're going to move quickly through the rest of this so we can make it to the end, but the rest of chapter 7 looks at a wise person versus a foolish person, and it kind of looks like Proverbs, the way that it's set up. And you'll notice that in the next few chapters. It's a Proverbs-like sharing of wisdom. A line here and a line there. We're going to move to verse 15. He says, "In this meaningless life of mine, I have seen both of these, the righteous perishing in their righteousness and the wicked living long in their wickedness. Do not be over-righteous, neither be over-wise. Why destroy yourself? Do not be over-wicked, and do not be a fool. Why die before your time?" That's a really interesting thing to ponder. Don't be over-righteous or over-wise. He says it will destroy you. Now, the teacher is going to give us some wisdom on how to be wise with wisdom itself. How to be wise when you're learning all of this wisdom and to take it and apply it to your life. In classical ancient wisdom, the goal was to be or really look as pious as you can. Show the world that you're very pious and a straight shooter. And if you can show that to the gods, then they'll have favor on you. And so a lot of it ended up being fake piety and could really easily be turned into legalism. And so the teacher is saying here, God doesn't really care about your fake piety, and to engage in a life of legalism is not going to help you, it's actually going to hurt you. He says it's good to grasp the one and not let go of the other. Whoever fears God will avoid all extremes. Wisdom is more than just virtue signaling. It's not just being as legalistic as possible. Wisdom is something that we learn and acquire and apply to our life. When we want to just look as pious as we can to the world around us, we make wisdom very wooden and dogmatic. And when we make it a rule book, then there's always a loophole in a rule book. You can always find a way to get around it. Think of in the Gospels, Jesus is confronting the Pharisees, and he says, that's great. You guys went above and beyond the law. You guys are even tithing your herb garden. Good for you. But guess what? Your heart is like a whitewashed coffin, and you're a brood of vipers. So what matters is your heart. And wisdom is not following a rule book. It's alignment of our heart with God's heart. And there's no loopholes when you're aligning your heart with God's heart. And when we make it a rule book that we have to follow, it's all about us and glorifying ourselves. And the purpose here is that life with God is the only thing that matters, and glorifying God with the good things we have and things that we do is what matters in this life. So don't sell out on wisdom and be a wicked fool, but have some balance. Remember wisdom. Enjoy what you have, and understand too, if you're unwise, it's going to affect your life, right? It's making unwise choices affects your holistic embodied soul, and he seems to believe that it's going to end your life pretty quickly. So enjoy the balance that we have. That's going to allow you to appreciate life even better. In the rest of chapter 7, the teacher is going to accept the realities of sin. We all sin, and the brokenness it leads into our lives. Specifically, you're going to notice a really interesting verse in verse 27 through 28. He says something quite fascinating. He says, while I was searching but not finding, I found one upright man among 1,000, but not one upright woman among them all. That seems like something we could take out of context pretty easily. So remember, we're talking about the wise teacher. He's sharing his life experience with us. And this is either Solomon or a Solomon-like figure. Now, Solomon, we know, had hundreds of wives. They worshiped foreign gods. And this devotion to these women, which he married them for political power, for treaties. He would make pretty much like a deal with their dads. I'll marry your daughter, and this will keep peace between us. So he's making all of these treaties through these marriages. And what happened is this ushered in an era of idol worship into ancient Israel. And so this right here reflects the teacher's experimentation with finding purpose and value in life apart from God. He rejected God's design for marriage, and it left him broken, empty, and very bitter. And so in his experience with the women in his lives, because of the way that he chose to approach marriage and try to gain power, it left him very broken. Chapter 7 ends with verse 29, and then we get into chapter 8. And again, we'll move quickly through this, but this is just a preview for your notes if you'd like to dive into the giant packet of notes that I have. Chapter 8 is really a reflection on, after the teacher deconstructs everything, he circles back to the prior assessments he's made. You can't control life, so enjoy what's been given to you. Use your gifts well. The things that you have. Use them well while you have them. And the teacher in chapter 8 really seems to touch on the Genesis 2 design for humanity, that God created you to honor him, love your community, take care of God's world, create, bring flourishing to the world around you. Chapter 9 and chapter 10 are very, very short. You'll see they're just a few verses. Now, when you go into chapter 10, again, you can find a little more info in your notes. It's going to be a Proverbs-like format. There are some riddle-like kind of lines. They're going to require some extra meditation. That's a good thing. This is meditation literature. It's wisdom literature. You're supposed to go back and think about it and read it again and ask people questions about it. And this is also something that's meant to be done in community. So with the people sitting around you, with your friends, with your spouse, or people close to you, it's really great if you can think about these ideas out loud and contemplate, what do you think he means? In your notes, you'll find that there's some cultural and historical background that will help you understand some of the funky lines in here that just don't really mean anything to us in our culture, like wearing white or anointing your head or some different things that we're not familiar with, but a little more context allows us to meditate a little bit more on those things, and you'll find those in your notes. Chapter 10 is very short. I definitely recommend going back and meditating specifically on these that we're moving through quickly. Chapter 11, the teacher is looking back on work. You know, you don't have to be apathetic. Work, use your resources well, but remember that the days of darkness are coming. Everything right now is a vapor. In verse 9 through 10, he says, "You who are young, be happy while you are young. Let your heart give you joy in the days of your youth. Follow the ways of your heart and whatever your eyes see, but know that for all these things, God will bring you into judgment. So then, banish anxiety from your heart and cast off the troubles from your body, for youth and vigor are meaningless." It's really important that we keep perspective. When we're young, and all of us go through a phase where we think we're never going to die, we're indestructible, usually when we're teenagers or young adults, and we think, I'm never going to get old, I'm never going to look old, I'm going to live forever, and it's going to be great. And when we think that way, then when we start to age, it becomes very shocking when you get your first wrinkle or your first gray hair, when you can't stay up past 3 a.m., or your bones start to ache after you work. Then it becomes really shocking and painful if you're not expecting that. So we have to remember the precious gift that life is. And he also says, but don't be anxious about it because it's not going to change anything. You're just going to waste the time you have. It's short, it's a vapor, so enjoy it while it's here. If you worry about it, you're just wasting time. It's not going to change the fact that you're going to grow old. We're all going to the grave. That's the reminder we continually get from the teacher. And now we come to chapter 12. So this is kind of the grand finale. And we're going to hear the last words from the teacher. He says, "Remember your Creator in the days of your youth, before the days of trouble come and the years approach when you will say, I find no pleasure in them. Before the sun and light and the moon and the stars grow dark and the clouds return after the rain." When people are afraid of heights and dangers in the streets, when the almond tree blossoms and the grasshopper drags itself along and no desire is stirred, then the people go to their eternal home and mourners go about the streets. Remember, before the silver cord is severed and the golden bowl is broken, before the pitcher is shattered at the spring and the wheel is broken at the well. He says, and the dust returns to the ground it came from, and the spirit returns to the God who gave it. Vapor, vapor, says the teacher, everything is a vapor. And now we hear the author comes back in. So he introduced us, we've been hearing from the teacher this whole time, and the author is going to come back in and give his conclusion, his final thoughts. So he says some nice things about the teacher. He says not only was the teacher wise, but he also imparted knowledge to the people. He pondered and searched out and set in order many proverbs. The teacher searched to find just the right words, and what he wrote was upright and true. The words of the wise are like goads. They're collected sayings like firmly embedded nails, given by one shepherd. Be warned, my son, of anything in addition to them. Of making many books there is no end, and much study wearies the body. So a goad was like a sharp, pointy thing at the end of a stick. You could use it to prod a livestock. And then embedded nails are kind of like a way to keep livestock or cattle in their boundaries. So a goad is a good thing. It prods us into action. And keeping us in our boundaries is a good thing. Those are both positive things that we need. We need to be prodded into action. We need to be kept in the correct bounds to be wise. But it's very painful. That can be a very painful thing. If you've ever created something or written something or worked on a project and you get feedback or criticism, it is very painful. And it can feel very personal, and it can be hard to take those things. It's very hard. But when we take criticism and we take the feedback, it makes us better. And the same is true for our lives when we receive discipline or a word of correction or someone just saying, hey, I don't think that came across the way you meant it to. That can be painful, but it is necessary for us. It's a positive thing that's going to help us. The author of Hebrews in chapter 12, verse 11 says something really similar. He says, no discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who have been trained by it. It's not helpful for us to add unnecessary pain and suffering to life. It's also not helpful to ignore the painful but necessary parts of life that lead to wisdom and growth. We're invited again into the balance, holding both each in our hands. This is verse 13. He says, now all has been heard. Here is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it is good or evil. And what we're left with at the end of this crazy journey that we've been on, even in the past few chapters, of nothing matters, it's all a vapor, everything is like chasing the wind, the days of your youth are going to fade. Now we're reminded of the grand scheme of things. The author is giving us the final perspective, and he says that life with God is what matters. God is in control of the universe. I am a finite person. I am one person of billions and billions of people who have ever existed on this planet. If I think that I have some kind of legacy that will last beyond all time, or that I'm incredibly important for some reason, it's a vapor. It doesn't mean anything, and it's not true. I'm believing in some kind of falsehood. I can't control the universe. I can't sustain it. Nothing I do can change the vapor-like nature of my life. But God is in control of the universe. And so I have to understand my place in God's universe for me to understand wisdom and to apply it to my life. Now, God being in control of everything does not guarantee that everything that happens, as the teacher says, under the sun, is good or beneficial. He says, wicked and foolish people cause harm and destruction and pain. Wicked people are making money, and they live in big fancy houses and live great lives, and often righteous people really suffer. It's not that everything is going to go right for me and nothing will go wrong and I'll never have pain or suffering. But the hope that I have is not in the vapor-like nature of my life. It's not in me controlling my life. My hope is in Jesus. And for Jesus followers, our hope is later revealed in the story of Scripture, in the cross. Our hope is secured in the work of Jesus, who defeated sin and death and will one day vanquish all sin and evil forever. That's what our hope is in. We have hope in Jesus' triumph and the promise that when we trust in him, we'll spend eternity with him in the new creation, where pain and injustice and harm are destroyed forever. And in the new creation, we don't have to be flashy and big and have money and power and wealth. It's not about our glory, it's about God's glory. And so now, while we're waiting for God's kingdom to fully come, we have the opportunity to share his kingdom here. It's kind of that waiting for the fullness of it to come, but we still have an opportunity to share the flourishing of God's kingdom with a broken world around us today. And we have to be reminded that it's not about our earthly accomplishments or money or power. Those things are going to fade away. But we can use what we have for God's glory. We can use it well. And part of using it well is enjoying what we have while we have it. And to show God our love by loving others, by loving people around us, and use our resources well. Bring healing to the brokenness around us in the world. We'll finish with this quote today. This is a quote by Joe Sluniker. He says, "Maybe the author and teacher in Ecclesiastes are closer to Paul in perspective than we thought after all. A closer look at Paul's writings show that he also complains about hardship and considers good things to be worthless. Nevertheless, he concludes that all things should be done to the glory of God. Maybe rejoicing always is the end of a process that starts with being real with God, yet moves beyond complaint to recognize the God-given purpose in even the most ordinary aspects of life."